What happened to Capernaum? Capernaum did not participate in any revolt. On the other way around, Capernaum was a place of comfort, a safe place, no any problems. The house of Simon, mother-in-law, became a domos ecclesias, a church inside the house that have been used by the early church. During the Roman Christian period, Byzantine period, a big church was built around, shrining the room where Jesus stayed at, that we shall see. 614 destroyed by the Parthians when they invaded the Byzantine Empire. Early Muslim period, again the place flourished in an excellent way up till 749. The greatest earthquake happened here. Tectons moved under us 5 centimeters up to the north. Capernaum was totally demolished, abandoned, neglected up till today. Only during the 19th century, the Franciscan fathers, Catholic order, managed to buy the property from Arab Sunkiye, and they've started the excavations that we shall see. Up till today, the 3 main villages that they were condemned by Jesus himself, Capernaum, Chorazin, Beit Saida, they are uninhabited up till today. All the villages, all the towns after the earthquake recovered except these 3 places, Capernaum, Chorazin, Beit Saida. Before we go around and explore the place, any questions? Shall we go around step by step?
Yes.
Let's start over there. Then to the house, and then to the synagogue. Or synagogue. No, let's go to the synagogue. No. Nothing was built the same way, but it's the same area. Up till today, nothing is the same way, but it's the same Now friends, come over here please. Synagogue, it's a Greek term. A Greek term means place of gathering. The place where the people gathers. For what? Now for worshipping, before for teaching and preaching. Now it's for worshipping, before for teaching and preaching. You have to put in your consideration. Judaism as a religion went into 3 phases. First temple period, from about 12 BC up till 586 BC, which is Judaism of the first temple, Judaism of the prophets. Judaism of the second temple period, Judaism that Jesus and the disciples knew, which is Judaism of teaching and preaching. Because when they returned back from the diaspora, They knew exactly that they've lost the temple because lacking of knowledge. This is what Isaiah mentioned. My people have been lost for lacking of knowledge. So they've started the teaching and preaching. Where this should happen? In a synagogue. So synagogue became a school for teaching and preaching, not for worshipping. Up till 70 AD. 70 AD, temple was what? Destroyed. So the synagogue became the center of the Jewish religious life. No sacrifice. Judaism turned from biblical Judaism, sacrifice, high priest, into rabbinic Judaism, Phariseeism. So they needed the synagogue for teaching and preaching. Now, this is not the synagogue that Jesus knew, the upper one. It's so fancy. Corinthian capitals, white stones came from an area called opposite Nazareth. Today we call it, it rings a bell in my head, I forgot the name of the area, wow. It will come. A village opposite Nazareth, where we have the limestone. So it's too luxurious. It goes back to the 4th century. Most probably the Christians, the Byzantine Christians, upgraded the synagogue where Jesus used to teach and preach. But when the Franciscan fathers came over here to excavate the place, especially Father Corbu, he wasn't convinced, so he started removing the blocks till he found the basalt stone synagogue where Jesus used to teach and preach.
Okay.
So one above the other.
Okay.
And he found over here coins that goes back to the 1st century. And if we go back to the Holy Gospel of Mark chapter 8, the location of this synagogue matches the house, one opposite the other. He had left the synagogue and he went to the house.
Okay.
It's the place where Jesus healed that lady that was died by the devil for 18 years.
Okay.
Here he started a revolution teaching by saying Sabbath was made for the man to rest, not on the way around. Man was made for the Sabbath. So Sabbath, it's a day that you should be liberated from your work, not to be a slave for the Sabbath.
Yes.
Here he said something very important when everyone had left him. I am the true bread of life. Not like the manna that your ancestors have eaten in the desert. Why he said manna? Because the Israelites, when they saw the manna in the desert, they didn't say, what is this? They said, who is this? And that's why Moses took part of the manna in a pot, and the pot was in the Ark of Covenant. Exactly like the divine, that it will be within the womb of Virgin Mary. So that's why one of the titles that we use related to Virgin Mary, Ark of Covenant, because she have hold the divine in her womb like the manna that was within the Ark of Covenant. So all these teachings were given over here. Even though it was like a revolution teaching, they did not accept that teaching. Any questions?
It's good now.
Let's go to that side before you will take your free time around.
Look at the synagogue. There's a synagogue out
Yeah,
there.
you will take your time to go and take pictures. Let's go.
Bangunan di bawah. Ini saudara-saudara kita dari Kenya.
Friends, who was living over here? What type of people? Farmers, fishermen, and fishermen not always poor. They were rich. Sometimes they were rich. Zabadi's family, they were so rich and poor, and they were fishermen. Peter was a fisherman, but poor. So you have up and down. Farmers as well. But people that they traders using the Yamores. How they live? Erwin comes first. Big walls, small windows below. Usually we have the windows at the top. Now here the windows are below to allow only cold air, not hot air, to come in. Many rooms around the main room for the big family to stay at. Then the roof, which was made from palm branches, mud and bamboo stick. So after every rainy season, what they used to do, they used to change the roof, removing the roof. A carpenter comes and he removes the roof. So we know now at what time of the year this paralytic person was healed after the rain. They've removed the roof and they've laid him down. So it was the time that they changed the roof after the winter, after the rain.
Okay.
One of the parables that Jesus gave from the daily life of these people, a lady lost a coin. What is the story of that coin? The groom, when he goes to the house of his bride, he gives her a little amount of money in her hand, and he gives her a necklace from 10 coins. Every day that he comes from work, she should wear the necklace with this 10 coins. Luke chapter 15. Which means that if she will lose the necklace or one of the coins, it will be like a sign of unfaithful. It's a big problem those days, like losing your own wedding ring. So that poor lady have lost one of the coins. What she will do? She was under a big stress. Her mother-in-law shouting. The sons are playing. And her husband coming from work hoping that he will find good food to eat. And she have lost the coin, so she was under a very huge stress. She lighted a candle. Why? Because walls were tall and windows were short. And the only way for the light coming into the place through the gate. So that's why she lighted a candle. And she started sweeping. See how the pavement looks like? Full of cracks. Very easy for the coin to be lost, very difficult to be found. When she found that coin, she was full of joyful and she invited the family to celebrate with her. So Luke chapter 15 gives us an excellent example from the life of these people over here, and we can see how. Any questions? Let's go to the last place before you take your free time.
We remember is that when the house was so crowded, even at the door, no one could
No.
reach the door of the house. And the paralytic who was carried by people came here, he couldn't go through inside the house. So his friends went
Now
up
come over
and
here first.
they removed one of the branches and they
This wall below us here where I'm pointing, can you see it?
was standing.
The black basalt wall
Yes.
goes back to the 1st century. It's the wall that was built by the early church to separate the room where Jesus used to teach and preach from the other rooms around, where he stayed at, which means that this is the house of Potalia, wife of Saint Peter, and her mother that we don't know her name. We don't know Peter's mother-in-law. Later on, an octagonal, what? Yeah. Now, later on, an octagonal church was built around that was destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed by the earthquake. Now,
Holy area
this is the place where she was healed from the fever. Now here when we talk about fever, 2,000 years ago, fever was a sickness of death. Today we know fever under the name of malaria. It's the sickness of malaria. If you have a swamp, if you have a lake, if you have mosquitoes. And what mosquitoes carries? Malaria. So he have healed her from a sickness of death that we believe it's the malaria today. And this was a real sickness of death. At the minute that you catch fever, that's it. And she started.
Around that time.
She haven't been healed. She woke up. She was fresh, strong, and she started serving them. She started serving them. Now, during the excavations happened over here by the Franciscan fathers, simply they found some graffitis related to the early church, like what? Ichthus, fish, we spoke about ichthus. A cross, and cross wasn't so common to be used because at the minute that the Romans will see a cross, immediately they will know that it's a church. Christians, they were the only people using the cross. It's an instrument of killing. Exactly like today, if you put a machine gun, hanging a machine gun and walking like that. It's the same idea. For us, it's the instrument that we've been saved and liberated through. But for the Romans, it's a killing area. It's a killing instrument. So crosses was not so common, but they found crosses over here. Window, below the window, an oil lamp. Why? Because this is what we have been taught by the letter of St. Peter II. See the prophets as an oil lamp, but see the Lord as the true light coming into the world. So the light comes through what? Through the window. Window and an oil lamp was found over here. Minaret. The minaret of the temple that was in the temple with the 7 branches was a symbol that was used by the church over here. So all these elements were found over here. Now, take about 15 minutes, wander around, take pictures, but please after 15 minutes, we have to be in the bus.
We are at Nazareth. l'architecte là, mais l'architecte là de l'univers, c'est celle qui a fait ça. Mais l'homme est assez intelligent parce que l'intelligence, il a pris un roche à transformer, il a fait une avec. Il a fait ça. Parce que l'on regarde des arrangements qui fait dans la roche, l'autre bois. Si c'est pas l'été, architecte là, vous mettez roche. Chaque jour, on a besoin de poissons par des
Oui. Est-ce que vous pensez que l'expérience a changé façon, l'eau a prêché comme un prédicateur?
Oui, parce que les gens vivent. Les gens où tu comptes dire, c'est dans la Bible, là, inspiration, Saint-Esprit, bon inspiration, mais qu'on a ouais, on a bien plus d'arguments toujours. On a bien plus d'arguments pour prêcher. Parce qu'on vit la réalité, on vit dans le pays même. Quand il n'y a pas le de Nazareth, que Jésus, qui sac de bon qui a sorti à Nazareth.
Oui.
Regardez où on était au carrière. Où sac de bon, pas de bon, pas de pied, pas de. Et pourtant, en bas, c'est apparence. Regardez sur apparence, regardez. Sac de bon, mais sac qui a sorti là-dedans. C'est génial. Mais ça de bon parce que mon regarder sous ça frappe le gaz il voit pas rien quand on sortit à Nazareth là pas renommé et pourtant en dans son trésor
Est-ce que vous êtes excité pour les noirs entrer en Israël pour ouais place là même
oui me voulais venir même me voulais gain désir pour me ouais oh rêve accompli mais c'est grâce à une monde choisi pour me venir.
Oui.
C'est grâce à cette minute avec Pasteur Dicasse qui bon Dieu a mis beaucoup de séminaires pour aider à accomplir rêve là. Oh, c'est là nous qu'a expliqué sacré les bergers pour un berger qui baille ville pour
Comme nous connaissons le voyage pour terminer, nous sommes de l'autre côté de Jérusalem pour aller Bethléem et tant d'autres côtés. Pour le moment, qui ça on a dans l'expérience de ce fait là, on a dit qui plus frappé toujours. Nous ne pouvons pas entrer dans l'autre côté, mais qui ça on a dit dans le côté où aller Haïfa, Tibéria et Tel Aviv, nous monter sur la Galilée, qui côté qui était vraiment touché ou frappé.
Ça qui frappe moi, c'est lorsqu'on regarde et plein ouais c'est on regarde des montagnes aussi comme plein. On regarder et si la plupart jamais tombé, nous avons des faits. Mais bon Dieu, avec science et technologie, pour utiliser de l'eau, ils gagnent pour monter avec lui, pour arroser. Ouais, soleil là, bien calé, yeux et puis ouais, toute verdure. Ça vraiment intéressant. Ouais, en pile verdure. Oh, bon Dieu, en pile connaissance. Parce qu'il semble connaissance, c'est la caille de Chita. Oh yes.
Vraiment, merci en pile.
C'est un plaisir pour nous dans le pays côté Jésus est élevé. Peut-être gentil, mais ça qui nous connaît côté Jésus, côté caille Joseph payé, côté Jésus a grandi avec Joseph là. Et nous établi côté travail et chapette parce qu'il était ministre. Oh, Jésus était connu avec papa. Nous avons fait ça et nous avons connu l'époque là, mais dans 12 ans caché de Jésus, nous connaissons quelques explications là-dedans. Comme Pasteur Dicasse par là, nous avons posé une question,
Oui, c'est vrai. Merci un peu.
Isaiah chapter 11 speaks about what? Galilee of the nations. And since 732 BC, Galilee was filled with nations. I spoke about that yesterday. When Tiglath-Pileser came, he took the 10 tribes and Assyrians were associated over here. Later on, Greeks, Arabs, Romans were around this area. Galilee of the nations. The way of the sea, via Maris, that we shall speak about when we go to Tabga and Capernaum. The way of the sea. The land between Zebulun and Naphtali, and this was the land publicly between Zebulun and Naphtali. Among them shines the glory of the Lord. So simply fulfillment of the prophecy. First. Second, geographical elements, as we shall see. That area where Jesus had associated himself, the mountains, looks like a typical theater. You shall see that by your eyes. Going all the way from the top down to the lake. And there is another element that have helped him. The basalt stone, which is the typical stone of this area, a volcanic stone, and the water of the sea. So the shape of the mountains, the water of the sea, and the black basalt stone have helped the voice to be revealed in an excellent way. So that's why he have used this area. And he was the first rabbi using this natural elements, because he's the creator. He's the one who have founded the whole story. So this were made for him for teaching and preaching. Geographical elements. Fourth reason, Galilee at that time was full of sickness. Not only spiritually, but as well physically. People here were suffering. Countryside area, not so much developed, about to be developed, flourished, about to be flourished. So simply, he came for the sick people, not for the healthy people. He have healed them from their own spiritual diseases and physical diseases. And they were thirsty for the word of God. And this is the fourth reason. Lacking of rabbis, of teachers. The rabbis, during the time of Jesus, they used to start in Galilee. And they used to be trained in a school called the School of Rabbi Shammai. But later on, they used to leave the countryside area, going to where? To the cities to be promoted. Here they cannot be promoted. There in the cities they can be promoted. So there was a lacking of teachings over here. People were relying on apocryphas, on other type of teachings, and Jesus came to correct all this wrong teachings over here. Fifth reason, which is the last one, Jesus at the beginning have kept himself away from the high rank. Why? From the authorities at Jerusalem or the Roman authorities at the major cities. Why? Because it was not the time for the clash to happen. It wasn't yet the time of the redemption. He wants to establish the kingdom of God on earth. But when the time came, Jesus himself went into Jerusalem. The clash happened over there and he was crucified, buried, and resurrected. So these were the reasons that made the Lord coming to this area. Now we start driving through what we call Belmanuta, northwest of the lake. Now friends, when all these teachings were given, at what time of the year? The Bible gives us a link. The Holy Gospel of John chapter 6 and the Holy Gospel of Matthew chapter 14. Both, they've mentioned something very important. They've sat on the grass. The only time in the whole year when these mountains are covered with grass, where people could sit between February and May. The end of February and the beginning of May. After that, all this green grass becomes thorns. And snake starts to appear. So it will be impossible for the people to sit, relaxing and listening for the lectures that Jesus gave. So from the Holy Gospel of John 6, Matthew 14, we can know that he gave most of his lectures during the spring period. They've sat on the grass. Any questions? Now, 10% of Jesus' teachings were given at Jerusalem, at Mount of Olives and around the footsteps of the temple that Herod built. And the other 10% were given on the roads. When Jesus used to cross the borders, during the time of Jesus, ladies and gentlemen, northwest of the lake was for the Jews, south of the lake was for the Gentiles. So the Jewish villages were at the northwest, east, south were the Gentiles, Roman Greeks, Arabs. The Sea of Galilee was the borders between them. And also, they used to travel by the land, by foot, around. The area of Bethsaida was, and which we call today the Bridge of Eric that we shall cross, was the borders between them. As well, it was the borders between the two brothers, Herod Antipas and Herod Philip. Herod Antipas was the tetrarch of Galilee, king, but he wasn't a king, he was a puppet, holding just a title of a king without any authorities. While his brother was the king or tetrarch means ruler of a quarter, of Goyanitas, the Golan Heights. So here we see Jesus as a teacher traveling between the borders, going from Herod Antipas territories to Herod Philip territories, because Herod Antipas wanted to see Jesus after he killed John the Baptist, and it wasn't the time. Not if Herod wants to see Jesus, he will see Jesus. Whenever Jesus wanted to see Herod, he will see Jesus. The decision in the hand of Jesus, not within the hand of Herod. And when the time came, Jesus went to Herod at Jerusalem, and he met him over there. So that's why he kept himself away from the high rank, wandering within the borders between Galilee, Goyanitas, and Phoenicia, that we shall cross, which we call today Upper Galilee. Any questions? Questions? Okay, so we are now on the way, and on the way we shall speak about the parables that Jesus gave on this way, like the parable of the sower, as an example. It was on this way. Okay, Matthew chapter 13. my friend. Leave the Bible away from have left road number 1 and now we're driving around road number 90. Now these are the mountains of Qumran. At the minute that we shall turn to the left, it will be to our right hand side. Qumran mountains, where we are coming to visit and to have lunch here.
Let's see, huh?
Keep going.
Gamun kap kali kon. Gamun kap kali bajil. Gamun kap kali bajil. Kap kali tostel. Oi. Na baixo lá.
Não há Lex lá.
Oi, cadê a pomba? Vai meter lá.
There's step, there's step.
founder of the dynasty, the one that he killed the children of Bethlehem. This is Herod the Great. Then comes his 3 sons, that they were also nicknamed Herod. Herod Archaeology, who was mentioned book of Matthew, that he was still searching for Jesus. Herod Antipas, who met the Lord on his crucifixion procedure, and he mocked the Lord. Herod Antipas the fox, nicknamed the fox. Herod Philip, the one that Jesus went to Caesarea Philippi, his own territories. Then comes Herod Agrippa the first, the one who was mentioned, book of Acts, the one who stoned St. Stephen's, the one who killed St. James, and he put St. Peter in prison. And the last one, Herod Agrippa the second, 91 AD he died, and this was the end of the Herodian dynasty. So literally we have 6 Herods. All right. Let's continue to the other side. This is the pinnacle of the temple. The pinnacle, it's the place where Satan took Jesus Christ to that area. Why? He wants to see if he is the true Messiah or not, because according to the Jewish culture, and that's why this event was mentioned, because he wrote his Bible. So according to the book of Matthew, the Holy Gospel of Matthew, Jesus was taken there to the edge, and Satan asked him, if you're the Son of Man, you throw yourself down, because it's written, nothing will harm you, even his angels will come and serve you. Yeah, exactly, at the top of the building, at the edge. So immediately Jesus said, do not tempt your own God. Why Satan took him over here to the edge of the temple? Because according to the book of Daniel, when the Messiah will appear, he will appear at the edge of the temple, the pinnacle. This will be his sign, the star and the angels coming and serving him. Satan wasn't sure if this was the one or not. And Jesus had camouflaged himself to finish the plan of what we call redemption, the plan of redemption. So after Satan have left him, who came to serve Jesus? Angels came to serve Jesus, proving that he is the true Messiah. Matthew was so clear about it. Now, if we look just a few meters below, what do we have? This is where the church have been born. The Holy Spirit have fulfilled the disciples at Mount Zion there. Then St. Peter came to the steps of the temple and he gave a speech. 3,000 people were baptized. And they've immersed themselves within this ritual baths. So this is where the church have been born. And this is what Ezekiel mentioned, Ezekiel chapter 8. I saw a river of water coming down from the Temple Mount. And the river continued all the way to En-Gedi and Anortin Kamea. And I saw the people catching fish. And what Jesus told his disciples, I shall make you. This is where they start catching fish. And this is where the early church was baptized, by immersing themselves in water. Exactly like Ezekiel. The water came to my knee, then to my chest, then I was totally immersed in water. So this is where it happened, around this area. And this is where Jesus came shouting, I am the true spring of water. John chapter 7. Why? Because the Jews used to think that at the day of Tabernacle, the Feast of Tabernacle, God will cover the place with a cloud, and few drops of water will come down, giving blessing for the whole water of the world. So here Jesus comes and shouts, I am the true spring of water. Anybody comes and drink for me, never he will be thirsty again. So he's changing the whole mentality. John chapter 7 speaks about that. And for the first time we see Jesus shouting, I am the true spring of water. It happened around here. Any questions? Shall we continue?
Yes.
Let's go. What happened at the pools of Siloam? No, this is Bethesda. I'm talking about the pools of Siloam. The pools of Siloam, first of all, it's the place where Solomon became a king at. Yeah? Gihon Spring. Gihon Spring. Gihon Spring was mentioned in the Bible, book of Genesis. 4 springs went out from the Garden of Eden. Kishon and Fishon, which is the Nile. Gihon and Fishon. Gihon, the spring of Gihon. Fishon is the Nile. Tigris and Euphrates. Tigris and Euphrates.
I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, book of Genesis spoke about it. It's the place where Solomon became a king. But it's the place where Jesus have created an eyes for a blind person. Showing all the people how he have created Adam and Eve as a God. He spat on the ground, he took mud, and he covered the eyes of this person who was born without eyes. And he told him, go down and wash your own eyes there. And for the first time, we see a rabbi standing for the rights of the handicapped. Jesus was the first teacher to stand for the rights of the handicapped. Why? According to the Old Testament mentality, the people who were handicapped or born handicapped, either their father or their mother or their grandfather or their grandmother were sinners. And I should follow the sin of the fathers through not one generation, 4 generations. So that's why the disciples came asking, who did the sin? His father or his mother? And here Jesus says, neither his father or his father, for the glory of God to be shown in him. For the first time we see someone standing for the rights of the handicapped. Jesus Christ, and it happened around the pools of Siloam. All right?
Yes.
Let's move.
Let's move.
passé. Jésus a retourné. Ça, c'est vallée de Cédron. Ça, c'est vallée de Cédron. Ça n'a pas regardé là, côté qui vient fort de ces deux portes. C'est là Jésus qui a retourné, c'est là qu'il a passé pour entrer en dedans.
Friends, here we are at the Garden of Gethsemane. And Gethsemane came from the term Gachmanim, which means the press of oil. Let them pass. Come over here. Let them pass. Come near me. Let them pass. The first mentioning of Gachmanim, the press of oil, Gethsemane, Isaiah 63, 1-7. Isaiah starts speaking about this place, and Isaiah spoke about the man who will cross the press alone, his hands full of blood squeezed from the sorrow. And this is the same thing that happened by our Lord. This is the place where he came and prayed at the rock which is today inside the church. And his holy perspiration became like a drops of blood, which means that he was squeezed alone. This is the place where he felt lonely. And he went to his disciples asking for 1 hour. You could not stay with me 1 hour. This is the place where he said, my soul is sorrowful till the point of death. And this is the place where he was taken, arrested out from. So you are now at the garden. Things have been changed. The garden had been changed. Only 8 olive trees that have survived from those days, which is today fenced by this fence, iron fence. The church itself shrining the rock, inside it the rock, where the holy perspiration of Jesus became like a drops of blood. So now you are at the Gachmanim, the press of oil. Shall we go around? Yeah. section of the upper room. Around this area, the Lord have formed the Last Supper. How this happened? The Lord asked, the disciples came to the Lord asking, where we shall have the supper, the Sabbath, the Passover, or the regular supper. He said, go, you will find a man carrying a jar. This was Saint Mark. And this was the sign between him and Jesus. Because during the time of Jesus, it was a shame for men to carry jars. Only women who can carry jars. But Saint Mark was happy to carry the jar. A man carrying a jar. So when the man will carry the jar, he will not walk slowly. He will run. And the disciples were running after him. Then they came to the furnished room, but there wasn't a big table, a very small table, cushion and mattresses around where they laid like that, eat and relax. As a rabbi, Jesus, as a teacher, first of all, he should prepare, bless the bread, bless the wine, give them to taste, and then they start the meal. But he didn't do that. He have turned things around. In which way? First, he prepared for them the meal. Judas was with them, and he dipped his own hand in the plate of Jesus, to be fulfilled what was related to that. Who ate my bread have left his head in front of me. Then he washed their own feet. He's shifting them from old to new. He's building a bridge. Old Testament purification comes through water. New Testament purification comes through blood. His own blood. This is my flesh and this is my blood. Then, in front of him should be a basket with three loaves of bread, unleavened bread without yeast, wrapped with white linen cloth. He takes the middle one, not the upper, not the lower, the middle one. And he blessed the middle one, saying, this is my flesh. And he takes the cup, this is my blood. Do this for my own existence. It happened around this area. This is where they were fulfilled with the Holy Spirit. This is where he appeared to his disciples after the resurrection. This is where the first bishop of the church had been consecrated, the disciples over here. And from here they went all over the world teaching and preaching. So it's the mother of all churches, the area of the upper room. The building itself goes back to the Crusades. The columns goes back to the Byzantines. Now it's a circular used by everyone. Alright?
To what room? Garden.
What? Garden 2.
On the way to the garden too.
we offer you a job? Can we offer you a job?
Yes, yes.
Now that was done at 6 o'clock this morning. It was washed, but I can't guarantee what it's like by now. Yeah.
Alexa, something here, something here.
Have you been waiting very long? Just a few minutes. Well, you are a very large group.
Yes.
How many altogether? 80.
85.
And no whisperer, so you're going to have to depend on my voice. So welcome from Haiti, I understand. Yes. From Florida. Haiti, but Florida.
Yes.
Got it now. Okay. No problem with English. Everybody understands English.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Do you understand Welsh?
No, we don't know.
Ti'n gwybod Cymraeg? Os ych chi am? No, I can speak some Welsh if you'd like, but that's the only other language I've got. Yeah, I'm from Wales, in the UK.
Okay.
So I'm very, very pleased to be your guide this afternoon. It's just the tour you're having. You're not having a service? No, just the tour. Yeah. Okay. So it is a special pleasure to greet you. My name is Stuart. I'm an Anglican priest since 1971. What denomination are you, folk?
Christian.
Southern Baptist?
No.
Christian.
Pentecostal? Sorry?
Non-denominational.
Non-denominational.
Yes.
That's the new American denomination. Yeah. Yeah, good. Well, I'm really pleased to greet you.
Well, we're more like Reformed Pentecostals.
I'm sorry?
We're more like Reformed Pentecostals.
Reformed Pentecostals. Okay. So do you get a little bit crazy at times?
We do.
No, restrained Pentecostals. Yeah, okay. So where are we going to go? 2 rules in the garden. The first is that you smile at me. I need lots and lots of encouragement. The other is, please, could I ask you not to pick anything? We have 400,000 visitors, and if everybody wanted to take home a little bit of the olive tree, we wouldn't have any olive trees left. I'm sure that you won't. So, the garden was bought by the Garden Tomb Association in 1894. And the reason that they bought it, that's a British-based charity, by the way. The reason that they bought it was because on this site are 2 really, really special places. One is a viewing point that we are going to go and see shortly, which is possibly the site of the crucifixion of Jesus. It overlooks the site of the crucifixion. Secondly, there is here on the site a tomb, which is without any doubt whatsoever the best tomb that you will ever see when you are thinking about the burial and resurrection of the Lord. There is nothing to compare with it. It really is outstanding. You're going to have the opportunity to go inside it. You're going to have to be a little bit patient. 6 or 7 at a time will go inside, but it really is an outstanding tomb. Now, there has been another group which has just gone ahead of us, and because of that, I'm going to give you a little bit of the introduction to the viewing platform that we're going to go to from here. That means that I will give you the outline of what you're going to see. You can go and take some photographs, and then we will go straight to the tomb. So I'm going to give you 5 reasons why it is possible that the site that you are going to see is the site where Jesus was crucified. Point number 1 is that we are now outside the walls of the city of Jerusalem. And we know from the gospel accounts that Jesus was crucified outside the walls. To have crucified Jesus within the city would have been simply horrible. The whole process of crucifixion was bloody, it was tortuous, it was smelly, it was very unpleasant to see, And so even the Romans would not have done it inside the city. So this is a map of 1st century Jerusalem, and we are here at the northern part of the city. And the wall that is here on this map, that wall is here today. Different stone, but in exactly the same location. Secondly, when the Romans crucified people, as a matter of policy, they did it alongside highways. They were the army of occupation, and any and every crucifixion was intended to intimidate the local population. So this was them waving their fist underneath the nose of the people who lived here and saying to them, if you step out of line, this is what we will do to you. So they chose highways because that's the way that you get people coming by all day long. From the beginning of the day to the end of the day, there are travelers, there are merchants, there are local people going out to their fields. And so here, going north to Damascus, the north-south highway, and east-west from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan Valley would have been an ideal location. And that's the one that you're going to go and see in a moment. Now, thirdly, you're going to go and look at a cliff face. It's a quarry face. Even before the time that the Romans came, the Jewish people were using this cliff face as a site of execution by stoning. Now, the way that they stoned people was not that I've got here a handful of stones and I see if I can hit you standing over there. The way that they stoned people was to take them to the top of the cliff and then push them off. When the body reached the bottom, they dropped rocks on them from up above, big rocks. And then they came down to the bottom and they crushed the skull of the person who had been convicted. So that was their method of execution. And if you read your Old Testament, you'll see that there were many different crimes that a person might commit for which they would be stoned. You may remember that Jesus was preaching in Nazareth, in the synagogue, and he upset the congregation with his sermon. They were very angry with him about some of the things that he said, and they took him out of the city, out of the town, and they took him to a precipice. Now, they were going to do to Jesus there what happened to people here. That is, that they would take him, throw him off the precipice, let him fall to the ground, and then drop rocks on him. So, my friends, I think that we will have given the other group a little bit of time. We're a very large group. Let's try and keep together, and as soon as we can get up onto the viewing platform, we will do that. I'm concerned that there may be another group behind us, and then we'll be overtaken. So if you'll follow me, we're going in this direction. So now, our friend down here is going to let me know as soon as one of these groups starts to move, and we will take their place, all right? So we are the next in line. But I've given you three things already. We are outside the city, we are at an intersection of highways, and we are close to a site of execution, a known site of execution. Now the fourth thing is that the cliff face that you are going to see has looked like the face of a skull. Now Jesus was crucified at Golgotha, the place of a skull. And this is the appearance of the hillside. This is a photograph that was taken more than 100 years ago. There's another one on the tree where you folk are standing towards the back. It's very similar to this one. If you look at this photograph, you can see the eye sockets and the bridge of the nose, and maybe the features of a skull on the hillside here. Now, Jesus was crucified at Golgotha, the place of a skull. Golgotha in Hebrew, Calvary in Latin. It is possible then that this is that site. But it's possible that it is that site not because of the appearance of the hillside, but because people's skulls were crushed here. That's quite likely. The problem with saying that the hillside looks like a skull is that we don't know what it looked like in the first century. We haven't got any surviving photographs from then, obviously, so we don't know. And the character of this hillside has changed even in the last 2 years. There was a severe frost, and the bridge of the nose that is here between those two eye sockets broke away. So we've no idea what it looked like in the first century. Is it Golgotha? It may be. Now, the next point, and I said that there were 5, is that we know from the New Testament that close to the site where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden with a tomb in it. This is a garden, and you are going to see a tomb in a few moments. Now, we know that this was a tomb. We know that this was a garden in the time of Jesus because there is a wine press here. Now, you don't need to take a photograph of this because you're going to see the real thing in a few moments. This is at the other end of the garden, and this guarantees that this was a working garden in the time of Jesus. You've been to the Garden of Gethsemane? The Garden of Gethsemane was the place where they were growing olives. In this garden, they were growing grapes. This was rediscovered in 1924 by archaeologists, and it is authentic. It is from the Roman period. This is the platform where the grapes were put and trodden, and this is the basin where the grape juice was collected. So what we've got here is a site of execution, a working garden, and in the garden a tomb. All of those 3 things are side by side. Now, are you definitely coming to the site of the crucifixion, and are you definitely going to the tomb in which Jesus was laid? We really do not know is the answer to that question. We do not know. My friend, you should have told me. We've got to... Let's go. Up here, sit down on the right-hand side.
Yes.
Over there, 250 yards, is the north wall of the city. Okay? Here is a quarry face. So we are outside the city. We are at an intersection of highways. Now this is the cliff that I was telling you about, is where they stoned people. Thrown off this cliff. That was what stoning was. You can see from the picture that is here, as well as the picture that I showed you, that this cliff face has looked like a skull. But it may be that it was Golgotha, not because of this picture, but because people's skulls were broken here. Now I was just coming to the point of saying, is this definitely the site of Jesus' crucifixion? So we are here outside the north wall of the city, and the Damascus Gate is 250 yards away, just across there. Have you been to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? Has that been on your itinerary? It has. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is here, so we are 250 yards to the Damascus Gate, and another 600 yards inside the Damascus Gate to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That is the only other place that says it may be the site of Golgotha. The only other site. So if this is not the site and that is the site, or that is not the site and this is the site, we are within 1,000 yards of the precise place where Jesus was crucified. We are that close. You will never be closer. We are that close. So nobody can say it was precisely here and I'm standing on the square. Nobody can say that. It may be there, it may be here, it may be somewhere in between the two sites. But what is far, far more important that you and I think about today than precisely where is precisely why Jesus died at the cross. And he told us himself. He said, I've not come to be served, but I have come to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. And you'll know this. I hardly need to remind you, but I'm going to. Ransoms are still paid today. And when ransoms are paid, it's always money that changes hands. Somebody has got to dig their hand into their pocket and get out their wallet or get out their checkbook, and they've got to decide on the price, and money exchanges hands. Now when Jesus bought you, he did not open his wallet. He didn't get out money to pay for you. He opened his veins for you. And he opened his heart for you. The very last thing that happened at the cross was that a spear went into his heart, and out from it poured blood and water. It was the sign of a broken heart. His heart was broken at Calvary for you. And the Apostle Peter says, it is not with silver and gold that we have been bought. That is cheap. And you are not cheap. You have been bought with the precious blood of a lamb without spot and without blemish. And that we need to focus upon today. When you go home and people say, have you been to the exact place where Jesus was crucified? You will have to shrug your shoulders and say, well, as far as I know, I got close. But you can then say to them, when I was there, the thing that I remember is the reason why. And I remembered the ransom that he paid for me. Take that home. But there is something about this site that you will get nowhere else. Absolutely nowhere else in Jerusalem. You see the hillside behind us? Why is it like that? What made it into a cliff like that? What made it into a cliff is that it was a quarry. They started at the wall over there. This was a hill that ran all the way to here. And very gradually they took the stone away, and they had finished taking stone from this quarry even before the time of Jesus. And the reason that they'd stopped was because the stone that remains in the hillside is very poor quality. It's fractured, it's broken, it's rubble. And the quarrymen said, we can't build with this stone, it's useless. Now, if the cross of Jesus was somewhere down here in front of this quarry face, if it was, and it would have been down here, not up there, They wouldn't have put Jesus on a cross up the top there because it's a road to nowhere. They wouldn't have put Jesus on a cross up there because they put a sign over his head that said Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, and nobody down here would be able to read it. They didn't put Jesus on a cross up there because he was having conversations with people as they went by. Some of them were laughing at him, some of them were ridiculing him, some of them were pulling his leg, some of them were challenging him about coming down from the cross and saving himself. But there was nobody to pass by up there, so if Jesus was crucified in this location, it was going to be down here, somewhere. But if this hillside was behind it, if it was the curtain that hung behind the cross, then there is a verse in Psalm 118 that comes into sharp focus. It's a Bible pincer movement because it speaks about the coming of the Messiah. And it's repeated twice in the New Testament, and when it's repeated in the New Testament, it is saying that the Messiah has come. And it goes like this: the stone that the builders rejected has become the head of the corner. This stone in the hillside was rejected. They said it's useless. Somewhere around here, Jesus was rejected as useless. He had two trials. The first was a Jewish trial, the second was a Roman trial. In the Jewish trial, they said he has blasphemed, he deserves to die. He was crucified as a blasphemer, a heretic, he was misleading the people, and he deserves to die. The one who was crucified somewhere in this area was rejected. The stone that the builders rejected, and today he is the head of the corner. He is the central figure of the human race. 2,000 years later on, 2.4 billion people who are drawing breath today name him as their Lord and themselves as his disciples. He is the central figure of the human race. And upon him, his cross and his resurrection depends our forgiveness, depends our relationship with God the Father, and depends our hope of glory beyond the grave. The stone that the builders rejected. And so there's a crumbling old hillside here that has got a strong and powerful message for us today. It's good stuff. So my friends, just a moment or two to take a photograph if you want to. This one is 1901. You can take your own of 2018 if you want. That is where the eyes are and the nose. It's not as complete as it was, as I mentioned earlier on. So just a photograph, and then we'll head to see the tomb.
Nose là, t'es sûr, on passe bien lâcher là, ok? On va bien lâcher. Mais ça qui est important pour nous retenir, l'idée précisément, nous pas dire c'est là exactement Jésus enterré. Mais il y a deux options. Il y a une Church of Sepulchre, il dit c'est probablement c'est là, il dit c'est probablement c'est là. Bon dit, c'est pas ça que malheur qui est important. Ça qui est important, une area à cette zone ça là, c'est là Jésus est crucifié. Et quand l'autre important te dire encore, il dit que l'État crucifié, du temps des Romains, ça va te faire, c'est qu'il faut que tu aies un highway dans la zone pour exposer pour l'autre population, les pour trembler, pour faire respect. C'est la raison ça que fait au fait. Et puis tout, ou pas capable du temps des Romains pour crucifier à l'intérieur de la ville. C'est en partie de là ou en dehors de la ville. Ok? Donc probablement, c'est dans la zone ça là, Jésus est crucifié. Dans la zone ça. Parce que Jésus est crucifié sur telle barre. Si tu es crucifié sur telle barre ça, mon en bas, pas même carreau ça qui crie. Là, c'est le monde qui est là. À force, au fur et à mesure, il y a placé le plan roche. Il vient image ça là. Probablement c'est dans la zone ça qu'on a posé ici. Il faut monter qu'à camper, il faut être well, il faut être qu'à faire la petite parce qu'il tape cher l'information. Spectacle. Yeah. Ça a déjà fait sens. Non. Il ne faut pas oublier samedi non. Probablement c'est comme là. Ça va se côté le Church of Sepulchre. Et c'est pas ça qui est important. Vous nous évitez nous ressusciter.
Now the wine press that I showed you a photograph of, which is this. Now this is just down here. You will walk past it on the way to the tomb, and it's where there are some 3 people together that are speaking over there by the green railings. So I will lead you past there as you go down to the tomb. So we have got a site of execution, a known site of execution. We have got a garden, an agricultural garden, and we have got a tomb in the garden. Now the tomb that you are going to see is like the tomb of Jesus in 7 different ways. So I gave you 5 points at the viewing platform, and I'm going to give you 7 points here. So that's 12 in all. And as you leave, you're going to have a questionnaire, and you are going to have to give all 12 points before you're allowed out of the garden. No, well, it's all right. It's all right. So as not to depress myself, I'm not going to ask you what point 5 was. Point 5 was that there was a garden with a tomb in it close by the site of execution. We are in a garden close to the site of execution. This is the tomb, the diagram of the tomb itself. Now this is like the tomb of Jesus in 7 different ways. Firstly, it closes using a rolling stone, the shape of a coin. Secondly, it's cut from solid rock. Thirdly, it's the tomb of a rich man. Fourthly, it's the tomb of a rich Jewish man. Now it's obviously the tomb of a rich man because it's so big. How do we know that it's the tomb of a Jewish man? See, Joseph of Arimathea was a senior member of the Jewish nation. He was a member of the Sanhedrin. The nation was being run by 70 men, and Joseph was one of them. So any tomb that he built was going to be Jewish in character. So what was distinctively Jewish about this tomb? Well, there's a very simple answer. It has got a window in it. The window was there as a ventilation shaft to let out the smells of a rotting body. The Jews buried in a distinctive way, different from everybody else at that time. They didn't bury in a coffin, they didn't bury under the soil, they didn't bury in a hole in the ground. They laid the body out on a ledge and they left it to decompose. 12 months later they came and they collected the bones together and they put the bones into a box, an ossuary box, and then they put the box back into the tomb and they recycled the grave bed. Now this is a Jewish tomb because it has got a ventilation shaft that would allow the smell of a decomposing body to escape into the air. And that meant that the family could come back for various anniversaries, they could move the stone and they would not have been overwhelmed by the smell. They could come back and they could bury other bodies. See, what's very interesting is that you're going to go into a very large tomb, but there are only 3 grave beds. And you would think to yourself, for a tomb this large, there ought to be more. But why? If every year a grave bed becomes free, unless there was a plague of some sort or some natural disaster, a tomb with 3 grave beds was adequate. And they would be able to pass the tomb on from generation to generation in the family. Next similarity with the tomb of Jesus. On Easter morning, 5 women came to the tomb. There was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Joanna, and the other women, says Luke. So at least 5 women. And when they came, they went inside to see what the condition of the body was, because they'd come to anoint it and to finish, they had come to finish off the burial rituals. So they came and went inside the tomb. Now Jesus was not then buried in a little hole that took 1 body or 2 bodies. He was buried in a tomb that was substantial in size, similar to this one, possibly this one. It's divided into 2 chambers. There is the weeping chamber here, which is where the family would bring the body and where they would prepare it for burial. And then on the other side is the burial chamber. So it's divided into 2. You've got room enough for 8 or 10 people to go inside here without any problem at all and stand up inside. Similar to the description that we have, the incidental description that we have of the women coming to the tomb. But the next similarity is this. Mary Magdalene goes to find the men. Peter and John come running to the tomb. John gets to the tomb first. He's running faster than Peter. But he doesn't go in. He stands at the entrance to the tomb and he looks inside. And inside he can see the grave bed. He can see the grave clothes. He can see the napkin that had been on Jesus' face, folded up in a place by itself, but the body had gone. If you stand at the entrance to this tomb here and you look inside, you can't see that grave bed or that one because they're out of your eye line. But in your eye line, you can see that one, just as John describes it. So you stand at the entrance and you look from here, and just as John describes, you can see that grave bed. I think that that is fascinating. But the last similarity between this tomb and the tomb of Jesus is that if you go inside it and you look for a dead body, you are not going to find one, because Jesus is risen. Yes. You have not come to a mausoleum. No. You've not come to find the mummified remains of some great prophet from long ago. You have come only to an empty tomb. But I said in my introduction, this is the best empty tomb you will ever see in your life, because it is so similar to the tomb of Jesus. Is it the one? Well, it depends upon who you talk to. Some archaeologists say it is from the time of Herod, and therefore it is possibly his tomb. Others say it is much too old for that. They say it is 2,800 years old, and Jesus, we know, was laid in a tomb in which nobody previously had been buried, and therefore it cannot be his tomb. But it definitely is the best you will ever see. Just for a moment, we stopped asking exactly where, and we asked exactly why. And I want to do the same here just before you go and have a look at the tomb. Peter preached in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, just weeks after the resurrection. Jerusalem, the city, is just over here. It's only hundreds of yards from here. And he stood on the streets of Jerusalem preaching to thousands of people, and he preached about the resurrection. He knew perfectly well that any one of those people who was in his congregation that day could go out of the city and go to the tomb and check for themselves. But he preached courageously on the resurrection. And this was the phrase that he used about Jesus. He said, "He has been raised." Jesus did not raise himself. He was raised by the Father. And he was raised by the Father for a number of important reasons. Earlier on, we were talking about a ransom that was paid for you and me. Was that ransom paid in part, or was it paid in full? In full. You're well-educated Christians. You say to me, it was paid in full. But I say back to you, how do you know? Now you say, well, Jesus on the cross said, "It is finished." Yeah? Well, where he was concerned, it was paid in full. But did the Father agree?
Father is Jesus.
Sorry?
Father is Jesus.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's a Trinity. No, the Father is not Jesus. Did the Father agree? The Father agreed because he raised the Son. It wasn't the Son, it wasn't Jesus, it wasn't the Father who was in the tomb dead, it was the Son. And the Father raised him, so that we might know that the ransom had been paid. And so the resurrection is just like a bill that is made out that you and I have to pay, but it says on it, paid in full, and that is written in the blood of Jesus. And it is signed by the Father, who accepts the ransom and declares that justice is done. And I think that underneath that it says the letters FOC. Only once in my life I've received a bill that said FOC on the bottom. FOC, free of charge. What did you pay towards your ransom? Absolutely nothing. Jesus paid it all. And the resurrection is the guarantee of that. But there is something else here in the resurrection. He has been raised. If you ever get the chance to go to Tiananmen Square in China, in Beijing, and you can visit the mausoleum of Mao Zedong. They say about Mao Zedong, the Chinese, they say that he was 60% right and 40% wrong. That's very generous considering that tens of millions of people died during the time that he was the premier of the Chinese Republic. 60% right, 40% wrong. Now, I live in a little village in West Wales where people say that about Jesus. They say some of the things he said were right and some of the things that he said were wrong. Some of the things that he said were things like, you must love your neighbor as yourself. Who can argue with that? The poor, the outcasts, the marginalized, they are important to God. Who can argue with that? That you should live lives of self-sacrifice, of compassion, generosity, and kindness. Who can argue with that? Jesus was right when he said things like that. But then Jesus went off on one. He said things like, before Abraham was, I am. That's a divine title. He can't possibly be right when he says that. And he said things like, your sins are forgiven you. And that's a divine prerogative to forgive sins. He couldn't possibly have been right when he said that. And he said, in this world there's a very narrow road. And there aren't many people that go on it, but it leads to life. And in this world there is a broad road, and it's thronged with people, but it leads to destruction. But he couldn't possibly have been right about that, because we know better than that. We know that everybody goes to heaven. So Jesus was a bit right and he was a bit wrong. That's what they say around me. Jesus was like Mount Zedong. He was 60% right and 40% wrong. What does God the Father say? He says he was 100% right.
Yes.
Yeah, 100. He has been raised. All of the other prophets are still in their grave. All of them. But he has been raised. Everything that he said, everything that he taught, everything that he preached, everything that he did was absolutely right. So the resurrection of Jesus is the guarantee of the acceptance of the ransom. It is a guarantee of the authority of his teachings. And it's a guarantee of the availability of his presence. And you know that already. You didn't need to come here to the Holy Land to discover the presence of the living Jesus. You found him already. And he found you already. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anybody hears my voice, I will come in. I was 17 when I invited him in, and he came. And the living presence of Jesus has been with me ever since, as he has been for you, I'm sure. If not, then this is the place to ask, isn't it? Above all other places on the face of the earth, this is the place to ask. Or to renew your asking. Maybe you've drifted and grown a bit cold. Here is the time to come back hot again for this living Christ and let him in again. So, my friends, a privilege to spend this time with you. Thank you so much for visiting the garden.